What's going on, guys? Thanks for stopping by my channel. In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at some of my favorite sans serif fonts. Now, sans serif, personally for me, is my absolute favorite category because of the versatility and readability of this font style. There's not a lot of decorative elements, and any of the decorative elements that do exist are super minimal and just like really fine touches on the font. So all these fonts are available through Adobe Fonts, and that's like the easiest way to get them, but a lot of times if you do some digging around the internet, you can find something similar to a lot of these fonts if you just type in the name of the font to the search bar. There's a ton of other free font websites. Just make sure you're abiding by like the commercial use and fair use laws. Make sure designers are getting paid for their type work. I feel like sans serif fonts are some of the most well-refined and best designed fonts available. Now for this video, I'm going to try to avoid my standard favorite sans serif font, which is Helvetica. I use Helvetica as a go-to, so I'm not going to include it in this video just because everybody knows Helvetica. But if I was to choose one sans serif font to use forever for the rest of my life, it'd probably be Helvetica because it's such a simple, such a beautiful and readable font. But yeah, enough about Helvetica. We'll jump into the actual video now. So the first one we're going to take a look at is Sweet Sans Pro Regular. This is a super simple font, but there's some real nice minor elements that I'm a big fan of in this. For example, the tops of the R's and the P's have that little curve off to the left. It's a super subtle touch, but I think gives the font a lot of character and makes it kind of unique from a lot of other sans serif fonts. This is a super clean font, and like most sans serif fonts, depending on the weight of the font they use, so, you know, bold, regular, thin, I could see it being used for a lot of different applications. Anything from header to body text, I think this font could be used relatively successfully. And paired with something like a serif font, I think that this could be great, especially with that little piece of the P's and the R's. I feel like that would kind of pair really nicely with a serif font. Okay, moving on, we'll take a look at Interstate Light. So this is kind of a unique serif font as well. I tried to pick like 10 kind of unique fonts, each one of them having like a unique element that I really liked about them. And the one that I really like about this is the tops of the H's and the bottom of the P's. They have that little like point to them, as well as the L's. They have that little point going up, kind of a nice little touch. Like I said, all sans serif fonts have to be kind of like flat bottoms. They can't have any really like decorative feet. So any design elements that the designers put in there are just like so subtle and to me just so nice. I really love this Interstate Light font. Again, I could totally see it being used from anything from heading and just like right down to body paragraph. It's a super readable font, but I could see it being used really successfully for a lot of applications. Okay, moving on, we'll take a look at Input Sans. Now, Input Sans is a really funky one. There's some weird stuff going on in this font. So if you take a look at like the R's and the H's, and the Y's, like pretty much every letter of this font has something kind of quirky about it. Like that H has that weird little cut in it that, I don't know, I guess it's like a triangle kind of leading into the downward arch of the H. Same thing like on the P's, they have that same element. The same thing on the A's, they have that one point of the font that gets really, really thin right at the base of the A. It's just super, super interesting. Again, same thing with the B's, the R's. Really interesting font. I also really like how the L's curve up, almost like a backwards J. I think it's kind of an interesting element. And same thing with the Q's, that tail on the Q. Really nice. But yeah, this is like a super interesting and unique sans serif font. Again, like all of the other ones I'm probably going to say in this video, I could see it totally being used successfully as a header or even body text. So moving on, we'll take a look at Rooney Sans Regular. Now this is the one rounded sans serif font. So if you look at all the letters, the bases, any angle that would normally be kind of sharp on most sans serif fonts is rounded. I also really like the way that the tail of the Q's are like one of my favorite letters in a lot of fonts because there's so many unique things you can do with them. I like how it kind of tapers and gets a little bit wider towards the end of the tail of the Q, and a really nice touch. I also really like the meeting point of the K from the main line to the two diagonal lines. It's like a really thin, delicate connection point. But yeah, this is like kind of the one rounded sans serif font that I picked. Most sans serif fonts are pretty sharp, but I think that this is a really nice rounded sans serif font. And again, could totally see it being used as a header or body text as well. Okay, moving on, we'll take a look at Source Sans Variable. So Source Sans Variable is a really interesting one. If you look really closely at the top of the H's, you can kind of see it almost like it juts out almost like that. Super interesting, very minimal touch, but I think it's successful. And, once you notice it, you can't unnotice it. I think it's a really, really interesting part of the font. I don't think I've ever really seen a sans serif font do that, so I felt like this one was worth including in the collection of my 10 favorite fonts. There's nothing too much else super interesting about this one, but I really thought that one little element on the H, it just caught my eye, and I felt like I had to include it. Again, could probably see this font being used from anything from a header to body text. Okay, now we'll take a look at alternate Gothic NO3 D. So the reason I chose this font is that it's super tall. It's kind of like compressed and stretched vertically. I feel like it almost like invokes a feeling of confidence, and the X height of the letters are all stretched super, super high. So that's kind of unusual for a lot of fonts. Usually the X height's a lot lower. The X height is actually pretty similar to the top of the cap height. I really think that kind of gives, again, that font that like really bold, kind of confident feeling. I feel like you probably wouldn't actually want to use this one for like body text actually, just because it is kind of like quirky and like I said, kind of like confident feeling. It's not like the most readable sans serif, but it does definitely have like a certain vibe to it, and I could totally see this being used as a header. Definitely one of my favorite fonts of this list, especially since it has kind of like a really specific application. Okay, moving on, we'll take a look at Futura PT Medium. Now, I'm not a huge fan of regular Futura. I feel like it's just super, super overused. And I know I said Helvetica is probably like my favorite sans serif font, and that's like the most used sans serif font ever. But this Futura is really, really nice. This, kind of opposing to the last one, has a pretty low X height actually. I also really like how like the tops of the H's and the L's actually extend over top of the cap height. Again, you don't see a lot of fonts doing that, so this is kind of interesting in that sense, and it kind of adds to, I guess, the quirkiness of this sans serif font. I feel like I keep saying the word quirky because it's in the sample text that I'm using, but it is kind of a pretty good word to describe this font in my opinion. Okay, moving on, we'll take a look at Hypatia Sans Pro Semibold. So this font's really interesting because of the tops of a lot of the lowercase letters. You can see that little ear that they have on them. I think that's a really nice little touch. It almost feels like it's like leaving a part of the font behind, and I feel like kind of creates some forward movement in the text. So again, I don't know if this one would be super great for like body font, but I could definitely see it being used as a header. I also really love how long the towel on the Q is, the capital Q. Really interesting choice. It's probably the longest towel of any of the Qs that I chose. Yeah, super interesting font, and I could definitely see it being used for like a logo or a header or something like that. Moving on, we'll take a look at Cronos Pro Bold. So you can see that all of these kind of have a similar vibe to the last one, the Hypatia Sans Pro Semibold. In the sense that they all kind of have that downward sloping top portion of the letter. So again, I feel like that downward sloping top portion of the letter kind of creates that almost forward moving feel. I don't know if this one could be used for like a body font, but it is kind of unique. Could definitely see this being used as the header of a page. All right, moving on, we will take a look at Brevia Regular. So not to keep talking about Qs, but I really do love the capital Q on this one, how at the end of the loop, it has that very thin, delicate connection point. Same is true for the lowercase y. It's just like really nice, delicate connection point, and I think that it kind of makes the font feel kind of light. I'm also a huge fan of the K, the lowercase k in this font. It almost looks like a capital R, but it is readable as a K as well, I think, because it kind of like, rests at that X height line. Yeah, super interesting K. Definitely like super different compared to most sans serif fonts. Usually you see like pretty rigid lettering with a lot of sans serifs. Again, this one probably not the best for body fonts, especially because that kind of weird quirky K might get a little lost once it gets shrunk down to like a 12-point type. But I do think that this could be used super successfully for like a header or something like that. And yeah, those are the 10 sans serif fonts that I picked to show in this video. I'm a huge fan of all these, and I think that there's a lot of really great applications for a lot of these fonts. If you enjoyed this video, it would be awesome if you'd leave a like below for the YouTube algorithm. It seriously helps out the channel. And if you have any questions, feel free to leave it in the comment section below. Be happy to get back to you. I'm pretty active on here. Usually I can respond within the first few hours of you guys asking any questions. And yeah, if you're interested in more content like this, feel free to subscribe to the channel. I'd love to have you guys as a part of this growing creative community. Super stoked that this channel is picking up a little bit of traction lately, and I'm excited to see what the future holds for it. So yeah, thanks again for watching this video, guys, and I'll catch you in the next one. Later.